Howdy. I've been reading a bunch of books lately. 6 books in the last month. I'm kind of in between documentaries right now. So I read For Whom the Bell Tolls by Ernest Hemingway, Big Sur by Jack Kerouac, To Kill a Mockingbird, I can't remember that author's name, A Case for Israel by Theodore Herzl, Plato's Republic, and Catcher in the Rye. So I'll give you my thoughts on these books real quick. So For Whom the Bell Tolls by Ernest Hemingway, underwhelming. Actually, there was only like a couple of good chapters for me in the entire book. I think the book started out okay, but it basically it's set in the late 30s in Spain, where you have the anarchists and communists and socialists with the backing of the Soviet Union rebelling against the government, which they called fascists. Sound familiar? You know, a bunch of crazies running around wanting to kill everybody and calling them fascists, which makes me kind of wonder what exactly were the crimes of the government of Spain at that time. The whole plot of that book, For Whom the Bell Tolls, was Ernest Hemingway. Well, the main character is an American guy embedded with these counter-revolutionaries, or these revolutionaries, excuse me, trying to blow up a bridge. And he's got the dynamite. The main character's got the dynamite. And so he's with these guys that are like gypsies and partisans hiding in the woods. And so parts of the book that really, you kind of look forward to hearing, he just kind of glossed over. And the parts of the book where he should have glossed over, he kind of droned on and on. And then he gave this dialogue to the people he was fighting with, this kind of dialogue that you would expect from philosophers or Western educated professors. The dialogue for these gypsies was just all over. And then he gave them Old English. They were speaking in Old English. It was very strange. I was not impressed at all with that book. Oh yeah, I was going to tell you this section of For Whom the Bell Tolls that I found interesting. And that was the section where the anarchists decided to murder all the fascists, you know. And matter of fact, in the book, he never went into the crimes of the fascists. I mean, their crimes were so bad that they had to go to war against them and murder them and throw them off a cliff. So what were the crimes that they're guilty of? So this one section of the book, which I couldn't help think about what these people in America, these anarchists in America, would love to do, is they took all the so-called fascists in this town and rounded them up and told them to go into the church and pray for their soul because they're about to die. So I don't know how many it was, a couple dozen people, and these were like the business people, the merchants, the politicians, and even the clergy. So they're all in there doing their penance and asking forgiveness to El Padre for their sins because they're about to meet their Maker. And outside the whole town, the atheists and the communists and the agitators, the jealous, the petty, you know the types. They are lined up in this city, in this town, on both sides of the street, a dirt road that they have to water down for the dust every day, right? And I don't think it had been watered down that day. I don't know why I remember this weird part of the story. But so finally, somebody goes in and says, "Let's go, everybody! Let's go! Get out! Go walk the line." So the first person that comes down the line, people on both sides of the street, nobody was saying anything. And then finally some people started yelling, and then, I don't know, the guy was proud or cocky, I can't remember exactly. And then people started beating on him with a stick, and they threw him over the cliff. Dead. I was like, what? The next person come down. They beat them almost to death off the cliff. And they were mocking these people. And like one guy they described as somebody who owned a store and sold things, but he sold them at too high of a cost. That was his crime. He was a capitalist. They didn't like his prices, so they killed him. And so that kind of got me thinking about these guys in Portland, Oregon, who are just demon-possessed people that just want to murder and kill and destroy. And it was kind of scary, but it was really interesting, that part of the book, on what society would be like if these guys actually were able to fulfill what's in their heart's desires. And that was the only good part of the book, honestly. The rest of the book, it was just lame. Just Hemingway, overrated, at least that book. And that Big Sur, Jack Kerouac, that book, okay, I liked it. It was okay. It was way better than Hemingway. You could tell within the first 2 chapters that he's a way better writer than Ernest Hemingway. And I like that book, Old Man in the Sea. I'll have to reread that. I mean, that was really, but I mean, that book a book like that kind of writes itself, really. So Kerouac, it's about him. He's kind of a famous beatnik guy. Who goes out to California to just get away from the East Coast and go hang out in a cabin in Big Sur, his buddy's cabin. So the first third of the book was kind of interesting. You know, you kind of like picture an intellectual, a kind intellectual. He's the way he writes is very kind, unlike J.D. Salinger. And picture this guy going around and interspersing dialogue in the book with the people he's hanging out with, but then he's got this little thought bubble following him around, and you're reading his mind, what's going through his mind. And so the first third of the book kind of set the stage, and the middle third just dragged on like he was just trying to fill pages and get this book over with. I think, yeah, he wrote the book in 10 days. And the last third of the book, he went back to the cabin, and it was just, meh. Like, to put it as one of these iconic books, no way. Not in my book. I don't know. The books back in those days must have been so boring. For Whom the Bell Tolls, that was written in the 30s. Big Sur, I think that was early 60s. And then I read, so I don't know. I liked Kerouac. He was all right. I just think that he rushed that book. He should have, if he would have edited that book for a few more months, it would have been a lot better in my mind. To Kill a Mockingbird, I forget the name of the author for that book. That book was set in around the same time as For Whom the Bell Tolls, late 30s, down south, very poor, very prejudiced. People, you know how it is between, you know, the blacks and the whites back then down there. I thought it was a good book. It was an interesting book. The main character was this kid. I forget how old he was. I want to say 9 or 12, and his kid sister just outside playing barefoot and, you know, dealing with quixotic neighbors. You know, if you like to put yourself in another place and time and to see what's going through the mind of people in that era, then it's a good book. It really was a good book. I didn't mind that at all. Theodore Herzl, I read that book, A Case for Israel. This book was written, I think, 1895. He had just witnessed the Dreyfus affair in France, which was the beginning of, what did the French call it? L'affaire. It was like the massive anti-Semitism just bubbled to the surface and just burst, and it was dripping from the pages of the newspapers at that time. And the cartoons that were being editorialized about Jews was just, it's kind of what you would expect out of Islamic countries today, pretty much paralleling that. And Herzl, you know, he's sitting there looking at this, and he knows, of course, about the pogroms and about the plight of the Jews and the diaspora. So he writes these, I don't know if it was one pamphlet or a series of pamphlets that were condensed into one, about the case for creating a state of Israel, which obviously happened in 1948. And so he goes into, I thought he was really going to delve deeply into the reasons why they need to go back to Israel because of the persecution and how bad it was. In fact, I don't even remember if he touched upon the Dreyfus Affair in that book, in that pamphlet. And he spent a considerable amount of time discussing like what form of government they should have in Israel, which was very odd. Some of his ideas were odd. He even created this flag for this new state with 7 golden stars, a white flag, and representing the newness of a new nation, and the 7 golden stars, all based around his 7-hour workday. I mean, he went really deep into this new form of government and how it needs to start out slow and eventually it will grow and get bigger and richer, which it did, but thankfully they didn't adopt that flag. But I found Theodor Herzl, honestly, to be incredibly naive in that he basically expected everybody to roll out the red carpet and hand them the land over there, you know, in Israel. I don't really call it Palestine because that was a name given by the Romans, and that name is a derivative of the Philistines, which is our people that used to live in Gaza, which was the arch enemy of the Jews. They changed the name of Judea and Samaria to Palestine just to mock the Jew. That's the ancestral homeland of the Jews, and other people live there as well, but their holiest shrine, the temple, was destroyed by the Romans. They were sent out for this diaspora. They were kicked out of their land, and the Mohammedans took over that spot and called it the Dome of the Rock. But anyhow, I digress. I know if I'm speaking in front of a class in J.D. Salinger's book, everybody would be calling me a digressor. So back on point. Theodor Herzl just raved about England and how everything should be controlled, the future of Israel, by England, because they were more of a pro-Israel. They didn't have this anti-Semitic bent like they did in France. Oh boy, was he mistaken. England did pretty much everything they possibly could to screw up the creation of the state of Israel, but ultimately it happened. So that was Theodor Herzl's book. I read Plato's Republic, all of them. I think there's a bunch of books compacted into one. He was talking about education and justice, and you know how philosophers, when they start to get philosophical, they tend to beat a dead horse. You know, like they state a bunch of things that are obvious, like hello, obviously. But he does this, you know how these guys get. But my favorite part of that book was book 8, talking about different kinds of government that were you know not good forms of government, and one of them was democracy. I was like, what? And so basically, wow, this city is a racetrack now. This old man's crossing the street in front of me. Of course, I'm going to slow down. Old man can barely walk, and he's wearing a mask. He can barely, you know, he's a mouth breather as it is. Anyhow, I digress. You digress, Greg. You're digressing. Okay, back on point. Plato's Republic. Democracy. So fascinating. He said that democracy is the number one form of government that is most likely to lead to anarchy, and then most likely to ultimately end up in tyranny. I was shocked because, of course, this is 2020, and we see the anarchists on the street calling everybody fascist, and they want to overthrow the government. And I'm like, wow, is this guy prescient or what? I mean, is this the future of American democracy? It was kind of scary, man. So if you don't want to read the whole Plato's Republic, at least go into book 8. And the last one I'll review, which was, I would say, the worst of the bunch, was J.D. Salinger's Catcher in the Rye. Why he became so famous after this book is beyond me. And he had to go and be a recluse in Cornish, New Hampshire, and hide out in the sticks because everybody wanted to go hang out with him. Who knows why? But this book, I think this book was like, He started writing it in the late 40s. It came out, I think, in 51, and it uses the Lord's name in vain, GD, like something like 300 plus times, and for Christ's sake, like many times, and it was just so gratuitous. And he tried, and there was a book about an adolescent, a 16-year-old. This is kind of a coming of age type book. 16-year-old kid he's obviously a smart kid, and not interested in typical schoolwork. He was at a private school, Penske, and he gets booted out, and he has to come back to New York. He had been kicked out of like 4 schools already, and he spends a few days in New York City with his money and hotels and going from bar to bar to bar, trying to buy drinks and sometimes successfully getting his scotch and water. And of course, he's 16 years old. Some people are carding him. He gets a doorman at the hotel is like, "Yo, man, you want a little lady of ill repute to come visit your room?" He's like, "Yeah, sure." So a prostitute comes to his room, and he gives her the $5, but doesn't do anything. He's like, "I just want to talk." It's just so, and everybody that he writes about in the book, he hates. He's annoyed with everybody, and he makes everybody out to be creeps. So he's not a very kind man at all. At least the way he's no Jack Kerouac, that's for sure. J.D. Salinger. What else about that book? Yeah, the book was miserable. It was a short book, but it was just a miserable, written by it just came across, the main character is a miserable person. He's so rude to everybody, and he calls everybody else rude. It was just an unpleasant book to read. I have no clue. I mean, I can write better than this guy. I can write better prose. I can come up with better dialogue, better stories. Honestly, funnier. I could be funnier. I could be kinder. And when I read Kerouac's Big Sur, honestly, he inspired me to start writing, because I had just finished For Whom the Bell Tolls. I wasn't impressed with Hemingway, and Kerouac I enjoyed him. I liked that style. So I literally came home and I wrote chapter 1 of a book. I have the template for chapter 2 written down. I just had to order a new laptop because my laptop crashed, and I don't want to be stuck in front of a desktop every time I write. But I am going to blow all these guys away. Leave Plato out of it. But these other guys, well, actually, To Kill a Mockingbird, To Kill a Mockingbird, I can't touch. That was a good book. Not the #1 novel ever written, which some people haven't, but I'm gonna try to write a book, man. Wish me luck. And push me. If you see me, you gotta ask me what chapter I'm on, because I need to be nudged. Honestly, I have too many interests in my life to stay so super focused on one item. So task management, help me out. See ya. Those are my 6 book reviews. Hope you enjoyed it. See ya.